Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2017 Ram 1500, we're going to be showing you how to install the Curt fifth wheel rail kit. But before we get into that, why don't we take a minute, check it out, and make sure it's going to work for you. If you're wanting to pull around a fifth wheel trailer, you're going to need a hitch in your truck to allow you to do that. And this rail kit is going to be a great start. So this is going to have custom brackets that will bolt up to your Ram and then bolt up to the embed rails here. And these are industry standard. They're going to work with a lot of different fifth wheel heads. If it were me and I got these rails, I'd probably pair it up with the Curt or a B&W even. There's several of them out there that'll work just fine. Which is going to kind of bring me to my next point. These are going to work with all the different types of bed lengths that the Ram has. Whether it be a short bed, long bed, and things like that. If you have a short bed though, what you need to pay attention to is what type of hitch you plan on setting in here, right? Because we have a short bed and our rails are up pretty close to the back of our truck. So if we were to have a fixed hitch back here, chances are pretty good, first turn that we make, if our camper leaned over at all, it would probably make contact with the cab corners. And so to combat that, with these short beds, you want to make sure to get a sliding type hitch. That way it will, when you make those real tight turns, you're able to change the center point back to the rear, giving you that extra clearance that you need so you don't have any contact with your cab corner. The rails are going to sit up just a little bit past, the bottom of your bed. So while they take up a little bit of room, it's not like you're losing full bed access by any means. You'll still be able to put a lot of stuff back here. That is if you don't have your actual hitch in place. Something that I do always like to recommend when going with the setup, something like this, is to pick up some in-bed wiring. That'll give you a 7-way connector inside the bed here, make it easy to hook your trailer up in terms of the electrical side of things. But other than that, at the end of the day, not really a whole lot to these. It's a rail kit. They're going to work with tons of different hitches, and with this being custom fit to the truck, for me, it puts your mind at ease a little bit knowing that it's designed to work with this truck, not some universal setup, you know what I mean? In terms of the installation, definitely time consuming, at least it was for me. Hopefully, figuring out the instructions and stuff on our end will make it a little bit easier for you to follow along if you plan on doing this at home. But be prepared to spend a little bit of time hopefully everything will go smooth for you. But with that said, let me go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of a Ram, and what I did was just temporarily lower and remove the spare tire. It will go back up once we're all done, but this opens up a lot more space to work. And while we're right here, I'm also going to remove our heat shield just so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. To get this off, we're going to have 3 10mm head bolts. I'll go ahead and set this off to the side for now. We're going to move to our wheel wells now and remove the liners. So there's going to be several screws that run along the edge and then a couple in the middle. And we're going to pull all those out using an 8mm. So with that last one out, we should be able to just kind of grab the liner and just kind of start to peel it back. And we'll get it to drop down. We'll set it to the side and do the same thing to get the one on the driver's side removed. Can move up to our truck bed and take one of our rails and find the placement for it. And this is going to be for the back or rear rail. What you're going to do is refer to your instructions. They give you a diagram and some measurements, and you pay attention to that depending on the length of your bed. This measurement's going to vary. So I found ours, and whenever you measure, you want to measure from the end of the truck bed. You don't want to measure from your tailgate. All right, so take that measurement, and I like to put a couple lines there. That way we are able to find the distance that we need for our back rail. Once you find the distance from this edge of the rail to the end of the truck bed, you can make sure it holds true all the way across, and then make sure this is centered, so you can just measure from the end of the rail to your wheel well tub there on both sides, make sure that's proper. And then once you find that placement, what I like to do is just take a pen or something and kind of trace all the way around it, just so if we bump this or something, we got the exact placement. It's just a good reference. From there, you can then mark the locations that you're going to need to drill for the hardware. So if you go 1, 2, 3 in, you'd have both of those. So put a dot in the center. You can use a center punch too if you got one of these. Moving to the middle, you're going to have both of them there. And then the same deal on the other side. You're going to be using these holes. Go ahead and move your rail out of the way, and then we can drill out our attachment points with the pilot bit. Never a bad idea to check underneath the truck, make sure nothing important is down there. And we'll go ahead and get these drilled out. Underneath, if your truck has dual exhaust, you are going to have to temporarily just take off the driver's side tailpipe. So not really a big deal. If you come more towards the middle of the truck where it wides off, we're going to have a fastener here that we can remove. Our truck does have aftermarket exhaust, but the same concept holds true for those of you that have a factory type exhaust as well. Might look a little different, but idea is the same. So we'll loosen up this band clamp. In our case, it's a 15 millimeter. Get that loose, and then we can work on some of the rubber hangers. Our rubber hangers, there's going to be, I think, 2 of them on our truck. You're going to remove them all the same. You can spray these down with soapy water, some type of lubrication. Take a pry bar and just work one end of the hanger off there. In our case, the other one will be right here. Looks like OEM exhaust, so you'll have another one a little bit further towards the front of the truck, but either way, get them all off using that same technique. When you're taking these off, it don't really matter what end you take off. It seemed like in our case, the one up top here, where it goes through these 2, is a little bit easier actually. The last hanger removed, if you kind of work your tailpipe back and forth, you should be able to slide that portion of it out for now. On each side of your truck, we're going to have this sensor here, and you can take a trim tool or a flathead screwdriver, work that off. We're going to disconnect these. There's a red tab. You can push up on it. Sometimes these are just locked in from all the dust and stuff, so you might have to kind of finesse it a little bit here. Push it upward like that. And then there's a center tab you can push down on and separate the 2. I do that same thing on the other side of her truck, and then up along this whole cross member here, there's going to be some wiring, and essentially we just need to release all of it. So find wherever there's a plastic keeper holding it in, and pry up on it to get it removed. This exhaust hanger bracket is actually bolted to this cross member, and we're going to have to remove this. Bolt's pretty much impossible to see, but relatively easy to get to. Right on top there, you can get it removed using a 13 millimeter. Once we get that bolt removed, we're able to work this around here. And drop it down. It feels like there's a tab or something. Yeah, this little tab is kind of bent up inside of there too, so if you kind of rotate it like this, you're able to pull this out and get it out of the way. We'll go ahead, grab our C-channel here, and there is a specific way this is going to have to go in. So this side is going to face towards the back of the truck. This side is going to face up towards the bed, and this side will face the bottom or towards the ground. We'll take this and work it in, and it will take some, you'll have to kind of finesse this in around the exhaust and all the other stuff to get it in here. Just make sure you're not pinching any lines or anything. Go ahead and kind of start to roughly get it into position. That C-channel, how it's going to work, it's going to sit on top of this crossbar and essentially get pushed all the way towards the back of the truck where it's going to hit the hatch channel or the bed support. And so you might have to take a rubber mallet or something and kind of tap it into place and get it lined up. If you remember those holes that we drilled through the bed, those pilot holes, not a bad idea to take a peek at those, make sure that those are lining up with our C-channel. And then on each side, about, a third of the way down from the edge, there's going to be a big hole in there, and you can take I believe it's a 5/8 bolt and flat washer, run it up through the factory bracing, up through the C-channel, and then take a nut and get it started. I'll do the same thing for the other end of our C-channel as well. Back up top in the bed, we can now come back with the larger drill bit and enlarge all of our pilot holes to the final size. Once the holes are drilled out, not a bad idea to come back with some clear paint or something like that and cover up the bare metal to protect it against rust, which I have done. Give it a minute to dry. And then in the middle, for these holes, you want to take these U-shaped spacer blocks, put them in. That way we can kind of fill that void there in the corrugation. We're going to set our rail roughly into position here. And we're going to take these type of bolts and just drop them down through. Underneath the truck, this is where our hardware comes through, and we're going to focus on the stuff on the hardware close to the back of the truck. So for this one and then the one on the other side, we're going to take a U-shaped spacer block like this and slide it in between there to fill that void. You might have to take a screwdriver or something, pry down on the hatch channel, just to give you enough space. And then you can take this spacer block, slide that over, and they give you these handle nuts. In certain cases, they might be applicable. It might keep the handle on, but for these, I just cut it off. That way I can actually get this started by hand here and keep it in place. For the one here in the center, since there is no gap there, you're just going to take one of the spacer blocks like that and put the handle nut on. On the other side, everything is essentially going to be set up the exact same way. In the middle, you just put your spacer block and the nut. On the ends, you take your U-shaped spacer, slide it in between there, put the flat block on, and the nut. So you want to get all of them started hand tight. What you can do now is take the hitch that you're going to be using and put it into the rails, and this is going to determine, you put it in the back rail, and that's going to determine the placement for the front rail. So you lift up, the front of your hitch, slide that front rail into place so it clicks in. With that, you want to make sure the front rail is centered, just how you did the back, And once you're happy with it, we can then mark out the spots that we're going to use to attach it. Attachment points are pretty much going to be identical to the back rail. You know, you'll use these on the ends of the rail, and then instead of using 2 bolts in the center, you're just going to use 1, and you want to put that one, you know, at the point closest to the front of our truck, so right there. So I got all the holes drilled out, put our rail back in place. I like to leave the base of the 5th wheel in still. Just kind of helps keep everything true. But with those drilled out, you know, you can paint them up, let them dry, and then drop in the hardware. The same combinations that we used for the back rail also applies to the rail up here in the front. We can move to our wheel wells now and get our frame plates installed. And so we're going to be working right here in this area, just in front of our rear tire. What you're going to do is take a pull wire, take the coiled end, and feed it through that hole and towards this larger one here. And we're trying to get it to come out there. So grab the coiled end, put on one of these spacer blocks and a carriage bolt. So we'll just thread on. Feed that hardware into the frame, pull it out, and then on that one, you're going to take this larger spacer block. Do one of those deals. And then for this attachment point, you're just going to take the coiled in there, put your spacer block and carriage bolt on it, and then put the carriage bolt in first, followed by the spacer block. Pull that through. And on this one, you can take the smaller block that they give you and set it up like this. This support bar here, this is going to kind of get in the way of us getting the side plate in, so this bolt up top, pull that out with a 10mm, kind of bend this out of the way, give us a little more working room. Can grab our side specific frame bracket, check your instructions, make sure you got the right one there. That's going to slide in like that though. And then our hardware can run the fish wire inside out through the bracket. Push this up into place here. The hardware pulled through. Then we can carefully remove our pull wires. We'll need to use them for the other side. And with the pull wire off, you can take a flange nut, get that started hand tight. And I'll do the same thing for this bolt here. We're here on the driver's side, essentially set up the exact same way. There's a little piece of rubber that they give you that you can put on one end of it where it kind of sits up against the wires a little bit. So you can pop that on there. And just make sure you don't have anything getting pinched. It is close to several wires, so make sure they're all clear before we get everything tightened down. Now we can get the hardware for our front rail going. The most difficult ones are going to be, there's two that go in these hat channels here. So you could take your handle nut and a spacer block, tape the spacer block to it, and you're going to have to kind of finesse it and put a bend in the handle. I like to attach it to needle nose vice grips if you got them, and then have someone up top, turn the bolt and try to get everything lined up and going. So have a little patience here. Once you do one side, you'll kind of figure out the technique or the trick, so to speak, and the other side will be a little bit easier. Once all of our hardware is in place and tight, then we want to come back and make sure it's all snug. So you can hold the hardware down here with your wrench and have a friend up top, you know, making sure we get everything snug down. Once you have these bolts tightened, you can come back, snug up the ones here in the middle, and then the frame plate ones on the side. Once all those are snug, is that same tightening sequence, except this time with a torque wrench to tighten everything down to the amount specified in your instructions. So once you have all the hardware torqued down to the specifications, at that point you can go ahead and reinstall everything the opposite way that you removed it. You know, your wheel well liners, your exhaust, your heat shields, and so on. So once that's all in place, you should be good to go. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Curt fifth wheel rail kit on our 2017 Ram 1500.